Hello and welcome back, and of course today we are doing a review of the QGD-3014-16PT, catchy name, right? But before I go any further, indulge me with a couple of minutes of your time while I tell you something about this channel and the past, okay? Get comfortable, it's going to be one of those reviews, it's going to just pause, get your tea, come back. So, in all the years that I've been doing videos and doing stuff on a blog and all that kind of stuff in the past, I've got to say that occasionally something comes along where I go, ooh, that's cool. Over the years, I have seen different kinds of storage evolve as technology has just light speeded it from hard drives to SSD, from SATA to NVMe. It's all evolved so fantastically fast. And occasionally, some of the best things either don't get recognised or get recognised for such a fleeting moment and then surpassed that they become caveman before they even get a chance to be superstars. And again, of all the brands that I ever talk about here on the channel, the brand that seemingly seems to break the innovation mould more than any other in terms of servers and NAS is QNAP. They generally bring new kinds of hardware to market. In the last 4 or 5 years, I've talked about a lot of their innovations. Now, on the side here, one of the first things when it comes to drives technology that really got me was kind of basically indestructible drive media, like the Solo Hawk here, that we tried to absolutely destroy last year. I recommend you check out those videos. But outside of traditional storage, most brands don't really do a great deal in terms of innovation. They take things that already exist and tweak them, improve them up to speed by a bit. But QNAP, in the last few years, we saw 5 GBE to USB adapters. We saw they were the first to bring combo cards to market that were 10 GBE and NVMe. And since then, other brands have jumped on board, arguably have done a better job. Now, a few years have gone down the line and technology has moved forward, but has to have been said that they got there first. In fact, one of the earliest videos on this channel was this, the TAS, the Android NAS. This was the one where we saw a device that arrived with dual OS of Android of all things and QTS, all of the Android apps readily available and accessible with your storage. No one else did that. So the reason I'm going with this long intro is this is another one of those devices. It is by no means perfect, and I will slate it at certain points during the course of this video, but you have to give props that QNAP have come up with a solution here before everyone else that I think is remarkably interesting, and that is the combination NAS and switch. It's not the first time we've talked about QNAP dabbling in this region. In fact, this is technically the third product in that series of combination NAS and switch single chassis devices. Now, there will be people out there that will say the very, very valid point that a device that has both a NAS and a switch in the same system sharing a PSU has one major downfall. If that PSU, the power supply unit, fails, it's game over for both of them. And that's a very, very valid point and something I think QNAP could stand to address. But with that exception out the way, and I would argue the lack of 10 GB on this, those are my only two main failings of this device. In almost every other regard, this thing is the bee's knees. It is a winner, it is a chicken dinner, it is a good solution, and let me tell you why. So, before we go any further, accessories, you get it in the big box. It's got the enormous amount of foam that I've just filled with drives. It's protected in transit. It's got the accessories inside. You've got screws for 2.5-inch media, 3.5-inch media, quick start installation guide, 2-year warranty that can be extended to 5. And again, kind of wish that was 3-year warranty, but okay. Original warranty information. You have got locks here for the 4 hard drive bays, not 2.5-inch SATA. 4 full 3.5-inch SATA storage bays inside, and keys for those metal trays, screws for 2.5-inch and 3.5-inch media, metal heat sinks for the 2 internal M2 SATA SSD bays as well. This has got another 2 bays of storage inside that can be for caching, you know, with that fast read-write and a low latency that SSD can bestow on the hard drives for caching. But on top of that, they can also be used for raw storage as well. You've even got an Ethernet cable, which is wildly unnecessary, I think, for the most part. It's a Cat5e, but because this is only a 1 GBE and 2.5 GBE device, I can understand why they went Cat5e, and I'm not going to rag on them too hard for that. But those are your accessories you get with this device. But let's talk about the device itself. Why is this such a big deal, in my opinion? So, It is a 4-bay NAS, but not just any 4-bay NAS. The hardware architecture of this, I would say, is comparable to that of the 550 odd 453D. It's got inside the Intel Celeron J4125, a very popular Celeron processor at the moment, quad-core, a 2.0 gigahertz that can be burst up to 2.7. CPU ranking, I believe, in excess of 3,000 on CPU benchmark. I might double check that, though they do change all the time. They review their numbers. On top of that, that CPU with UHD Graphics 600 means without embedded graphics, you are talking transcoding, you are talking 4K, you are talking virtualization with VMs being able to be deployed in this, but also support of QVR Pro with 8 camera licenses included. Think about that, 8 camera licenses with their software, which we've done loads of overviews for. And although it is a piece of NVR software that leans quite a lot towards you needing client applications for desktop PC and Mac systems, mobile systems, iOS, Android and more, and being less of a web UI via your browser to view all the cameras, because it does have stuff, but it doesn't quite meet Synology on that one. In every other regard, I think it is an incredible piece of software. Now, with that and this device, that is a big deal because of things that are IP powered. Over here, we've got Reolink IP cameras here, and an IP camera, for those that aren't aware, is an internet protocol camera that allows you to access it via the network, but also the internet with sufficient client support. This device with its PoE ports allows you to connect multiple of these with length after length, 20, 30 meter cat cable, connect IP cameras around your office without them needing their own power supply, because they are powered by this. Each one of those LAN ports later on we'll talk about in a bit more detail, but each one supplies up to 30 watts of power on the 16 network ports on the managed switch side of things. On top of that, there's things like IP speakers, IP phones, and a myriad of different ways that businesses are embracing network peripheral devices, all of which can be managed, and with the right software as well. If you go for the switch side of things, which has its own VM support as well of things like Zabbix as a network management tool, then you've got pfSense, that incredible enterprise grade, yet still predominantly freeware firewall software. You've got FreePBX and other SIP tools, stand over IP tools, that allow you to have an IP camera system within your building that doesn't need each one of them to have internet access. It can all be funneled through this device, while simultaneously being able to utilize some of the recording services of some of those third-party software as well, quality and training purposes, etc. On top of that, you are talking about a PoE switch inside this NAS device. So what you're getting is a NAS with a switch built in. On top of that, inside this, you have got KVM support as well, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail later on. But ultimately, you are looking at a combined solution for your surveillance, for your business, for your collaboration, internally and externally, with all the file sharing capabilities of QTS on the QNAP side, and all the network management side of things with a layer 2 managed switch with QNet switch. So, moving away, let's get back to the hardware. We've talked about that CPU. It also arrives with 8 gig of DDR4 memory, 2400 megahertz memory. It can't officially be expanded beyond that, but there are 2 sodium ports inside. I've already loosened the screws at the rear. Later on, we are going to remove the lid and have a good look on the inside of this device as well to see what exactly is going on under the hood. But that CPU and memory combination is a great SMB kind of a small, medium business and prosumer grade our hardware architecture here. It's no Xeon, but again, you're not paying Xeon prices for this. Now on the front, we go there, we can see, if we get the light to not be annoying, we can see an LCD panel there. That LCD panel gives us real-time information about IPs, network errors, temperature, everything in that, and you can all cycle through them. At the base of the device, we have got LED lights there for both the NAS and the switch, and on the side, a USB port there with a one-touch copy button as well. Now, it's worth highlighting once again that they are parallel systems, the switch and the NAS side, which, although they're sharing the PSU, a 250 watt internal PSU, they both have their own reset, restart, firmware updates, and more, both of which can be actioned independently of the other. So don't think if you're restarting your NAS, that means you're going to have to restart the network switch and everyone on dynamic IPs suddenly goes bananas. It doesn't work that way, and that works in both directions. Now, You've got this lovely cooling vent here on the side, because you are talking about quite a lot of power inside this and a lot of network activity as well, which will heat up that the microchip processor inside that manages the majority of the network side of things, separate of that Celeron processor we've talked about. And of course here is the storage side. So if we loosen there, we can remove that front panel and we find our 4 storage bays right there built into the side of this device. Now this kind of reminds me of the first time my family spent a little bit more money on the DVD player and got one of those ones that was a VHS and DVD combo system. It kind of looks like that here, where we've got a NAS on one side, a switch on the other, and they're both singly connected into the same device there. This is very much of that ilk. Now, if we remove one of these, they are metal trays, completely lockable there on the front, keys included with the system, and there's screw holes for 2.5-inch media as well. We will be doing a number of software videos on this device while we've got it here. We've got it for about a week. So again, plenty of ventilation, and each 4 of those bays, let's get them all out of there. You can run this device on a single drive if you choose. Start with maybe a couple of drives in a RAID 1 and add drives later on, depending on the setup of that storage pool that you go for. But inside, it's a lovely clean setup there. 4 SATA bays, lovely and clear inside. No loose wires. They're combo ports as well. Data and power all together. And again, that runs straight into the core system there of that handle the NAS side of things with that Celeron-based processor. But another thing I quite like is the cooling of this device. We've got plenty of ventilation there on that side. Plenty of ventilation there. We've even got those vent panels built into the front panel there, and although there isn't any ventilation there on the base of the device, we have that great cooling panel built into there to assist active airflow. If you turn it around, you can kind of make it out there at the angles, the active airflow system there. But the real cool thing are the ports and connections on this bad boy. Let's get this at a point where the light isn't going to absolutely betray me. We've got that large fan there based on the rear there. That's a 12mm fan. And again, that's an active cooling fan. Its RPM can be adjusted manually, but I don't advise you do it. It's going to be very interesting to see what the noise of this system is as well. Generally, large 16-port PoE switches require a decent amount of cooling because there's a lot of network activity, and I imagine this isn't that much of an exception, so I'm looking forward to seeing what that fan does when we do our utilities. Now, let's focus on this one by one. At the top, we have got the NAS side of things. So at the top there, as you can see, first we've got 2 HDMI outs. Now they are HDMI 2.0A, so that's 4K 60 frames per second each, which again can be utilized for multimedia, can be utilized for a number of business applications built in with HD Station, a parallel application that runs alongside QTS for the HDMI application, still utilizing the core NAS system. But I would say in a system like this, 9 times out of 10, those HDMI ports are going to be used for a standalone surveillance system. You're talking about a monitor connected to one or both of those ports. You're talking about a keyboard and mouse being connected to the USB ports and having a standalone surveillance system with a multi-camera feed. Remember, 8 cameras included, and you can support up to many, many more cameras in the feed. And also with QVR, remember that you don't have to have one feed per camera. You can have a camera and then divide that into a lower quality stream, have another feed that's concentrating on a single area with its own alerts. It's a very customizable platform, and that applies also to the HDMI outside of things as well. So again, that standalone surveillance system with QVR Pro on this, it can still be accessed via the network, can still be accessed via the internet, can still be accessed via all of the client apps for desktop and mobile devices, but you have that standalone as well for instant on-site checking. And of course, all of the cameras coming directly out of this device as well makes this a very centralized surveillance solution. Now, next to that, we've got those 2 network ports there. They are 2.5 GBE, so again up to a combined with link aggregation 5 GBE external output of this device to connect it to other networks. But of course, if you do connect to this switch via the 16 available ports, these ports also communicate with the NAS. Internally, it has a 2 times 1 GBE, or let's just call it 2 GBE, portal of access between the NAS and the switch, which again, it's a little surprising, given you thought the proximity. Why would it be as little as 220 megs at the top end? Well, that is largely down to simply the PCI lanes of the CPU inside and the architecture inside. You would have to devote a large amount of the resources of the hardware architecture of this NAS and the chipset to the switch to open that up more. But again, it's less important. It's worth bearing in mind that each one of these ports only maxes at 1G. So again, you have a potential 200 meg there, which will be shared between all those connected users with this, with the NAS side at least, but on the switch side, very, very different, and that's why that has its own network controller inside. Next to those, we can see a couple of USB 3 ports. So we had the one on the front for one touch copy, but these two, again, they support external storage, they support KVM, keyboard, video, mouse, and other accessories. They support web cameras of all things. If you want to have a localized camera without using up your IPs, you can directly connect a camera to this and have that standalone at the point of the standalone surveillance to monitor that room or whatever. On top of that, if you do want to use the HD Station standalone stuff for like standalone PC, because again you can create a Linux VM inside this, Ubuntu Linux VM within minutes, and it's like 4 clicks to have a standalone Linux computer running from this, while simultaneously you can still use it for storage, still use it for surveillance. It has a great floating point for all of that. And also those USB ports can be used for network accessories, such as the one we mentioned earlier on, the 5GBE to USB converter, and others too, as well as, on top of that, the expansion devices. There are a range of hardware RAID solutions currently in 2 and 4 bay that have hardware RAID connected via USB, but there are, on top of that, larger storage solutions in 6 and 8 bays coming very, very soon in the TR 106, I think it's 106 2CT and 108 CT or 2CT, the model ID. I've lost track of that utterly, but they're coming very soon, hopefully, fingers crossed. Now, you've also got audio in and out there. So again, attach a speaker, attach a mic. You can, again, that adds that standalone setup. There is karaoke software, bit crazy, but you know, fill your boots. And on top of that, you've got the reset pins there for both the NAS and the switch. So once again, you can reset them without the other one having to be done as well. Very important indeed. It is a very well architectured device. I've got to say, on the NAS side, heavily comparable to that of the 453D, lacking a PCIe upgrade slot. And again, that goes back to that 10G point I made at the top of the video. But notwithstanding the lack of that, I think in every other regard, it's a very, very good mid-range NAS to be bolting on to a PoE 16-port switch, which leads us neatly into the switch side of the gig. Yes, we have got a 16-port managed PoE switch here, layer 2. So again, you are talking quality of service control, you are talking snoop checks, you are talking virtual LAN, you are talking wait on LAN functionality throughout the network. You've also got support of SD-WAN in the QU-WAN and QWAN orchestrator application, where if you've got a multiple site deployment, surveillance, individual offices and a main hub, that is built into the price of the device. You've got those features and functionality. It's a very interesting upgrade. Once you combine that with support of services of IP phones, IP networks, it's just a far more managed network solution in that regard. And it allows you to keep it all in-house. Yes, it's a shared PSU architecture, which I know a number of you are less in favour of, and I get that. I really do see the argument there. But I think unless they're going to bolster in a second PSU, make this something a bit more redundant PSU, maybe that will be the next iteration, who knows. I think it's this or having to go onto separate devices which are going to have their own PSUs independently. Now, each one of these 16 ports, as mentioned, are 1GBE, so that's 100 megs, give or take. But there's also 2 Sfp ports here. Now, they are 1GBE Sfp, you're not looking at a couple of 10s knocked onto the end there, and these are combo ports which can be switched out for these other 2, but they aren't PoE. It's only the main 16 RJ45 PoE ports there. Once again, as mentioned, delivering up to 30 watts of power. There's a maximum total power dedication to the switch of 140 watts, so you can't put 30 in each of them. It is shared out, and you can't max out any single one more than 30, which does leave still over 100 watts for the main NAS side of things on this. Now, the management software, QNAP switch, can be accessed independently over the network and via the internet, but also within the NAS side. So if you're using the NAS for file management, you're using some of the photo applications, you're using the VM application, you're using a number of other features, you can, if you choose, access the switch side from within QTS and configure some of those quite easily as well. And again, the whole system very, very straightforward there, and it allows you to control these two appliances in your network environment at the single touch of a button. Now, the active cooling, as mentioned, is shared across the two of them, and throughout this device there is active airflow. It's very partitional. I've already, of course, had a little look inside before this video when I took off the lid, but inside everything is very well partitioned, which you're going to find out for yourself now. So again, as mentioned, I've already loosened the screws. There was 8 screws all the way around the edge of this device. So we remove that from there, remove the lid, and again, nice metal lid there. Again, very, very thin metal lid there. Got to say, it's very hard to distinguish how much of that is metal and how much is plastic, and if this is some mixture of the two. That's a very nice chassis lid there, for whoever cares about that. There's a few things worth touching on immediately. So first and foremost, let's have a look inside there. You've got, let's get the light right, you've got the 2 memory boards there, both SODIMM in architecture, 4 gig inside each of them, the maximum that this CPU supports. But you can swap those out for something bigger if you so choose. But what I would like to draw your attention to is twofold. Firstly, I'd like to draw your attention, if I can get a good grip, on that CPU. This is one of those rare occasions, if you look at it sideways, where the CPU of the NAS there has a heat sink on top and an active cooling fan. That gives you some idea about the heat that is likely to be generated internally in this device, which they've provisioned for with an active cooling fan on top of that heatsink there. Also, you can make those out. We've got the 2 M2 ports as well. So again, those 2 M2s for additional SSD storage inside the device. Plenty of active cooling over the storage media there, right behind the active cooling fan there. So you've got the passive cooling all the way around there. And the main, if we get it round like that, you can just about make out inside that PSU. Now, it's not a block PSU there, it has to be said. It looks like it's one of those empty box PSUs where they've removed the externals in order to achieve much better active airflow throughout the whole system. It's an open PSU with the whole network switch inside being based on loose chips on that main PCB board internally. And again, that is largely done to make sure the airflow is lovely and cool throughout. Now, I will say, in terms of the operation and the layout internally of this device, it's quite a clean job. For a device that is a NAS and a switch based into the same chassis, they've done a very good job of partitioning them and still giving everything its own kind of quadrant internally. I'm not going to take this apart any further. I don't think that's wildly necessary on this device, but I'm quite pleased with the layout of it, and I'm going to be interested to see what the power consumption of a device like this is going to be, and definitely the noise once it's in operation there. Because of course you've got the official specs online, but I'd like to sort of run that a test for ourselves, and I'm sure we can get a lot of that information from both QTS and QNAP switch. So, who is this aimed at? Well, it's aimed at people that have got their own shop and they're looking to have, you know, if it's a multi-floored shop and they've got multiple cameras dotted around and they just want one thing to store all of the storage. Maybe they're also going to be using it for transactional data. Maybe they're going to use it for emails and a server. Maybe even just entertainment and have music playing around the shop. All of that can be done with this, along with a bevy and a bank of cameras, all of them directly connected into the device. No need for a separate switch, which you then have to remanage separate sub-networks into. On top of that, of course, if you are running an office management and you've got multiple teams all working together, it is a great collaboration point. Because bear in mind, just because these switch points are PoE doesn't mean you have to use them in that way. This is still a very, very competent layer 2 managed switch that you can have multiple teams all working together, all directly connecting into this device, and therefore collaborating together, each of which, again, using the security services, using things like SD-WAN for remote connectivity, using the features and functionality of QTS at all times. So, is this a good NAS and is this a good switch? That's another interesting point on this, because this isn't the first switch QNAP have worked on. They've actually done quite a lot of managed switches, and if you're buying this for a switch, I think you're overpaying. If you're buying this for a NAS, I think you're overpaying. But if you were looking at buying a 16-port PoE managed switch. It's at least layer 2, maybe a couple of features of layer 3. Or you were looking at a fully featured NAS and switch together and you were thinking about getting those together. This is where this device lives, because the money you save in buying both of them combined in one system and the centralised management, that bit of money you save can go towards a UPS. And I think that should hopefully address some people and their feelings towards the shared PSU. I'm not going to say it's a foolproof solution, and I'd like to have seen a dual PSU version of this device, but apparently this is not it. But overall, I like this system. I think it's another one of those hardware architecture devices that I'm going to talk about in years to come, much like the ones that we talked about at the top of the video, and ultimately I quite like it. I do go into a lot more detail in the hardware review, and I will be doing lots of software overviews on this device, because that is really going to be where this device has a chance to, show the proof in the pudding. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you did, click like. If you want to learn more, click subscribe. Do visit the links in the description to find out more about this device, the Guardian series, and hopefully help you decide to get the right network solution for you. Otherwise, I will see you next time.